Welcome to Transformational Pathways, a podcast created by Toastmasters District 46 in the greater New York area, where we share conversations from influencers within the Toastmasters community and people whose lives have positively transformed by walking down the Toastmasters path. Whether you're just getting started in your career, have had recent career changes, or you're navigating different languages, we're here to help you build confidence by discovering new tools, overcoming your fears to find your voice, and engaging in a thriving community. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Toastmasters District 46 Transformational Highways podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and walking the pathway with us today is Pat Johnson. Pat has been a Toastmaster for years. And Pat, I've got to say, your accomplishments are jaw-dropping. You've been second vice president, senior vice president of the international organization, and you've been the big shebang, the president of Toastmasters International in 2010 and 2011. You're also today the CEO of Pat Johnson and Associates, which provides speaker coaching, and an affiliate coach with accomplishment coaching, where you help folks create the dreams that they're dreaming. You're calling in from Canada, and Pat, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much, Scott. I'm thrilled to be here. I love modern technology, that you're in New York and I'm pretending to be in New York.
Everyone can pretend to be in New York because everyone is really from New York. And is it true that you actually like New York?
I actually adore New York. There's so many parts of it that I love. I'm a great people watcher, so I'm one of those people that stands around in Grand Central and watches people come and go. And I've spent days in Central Park, and I get lost on the streets. I've been there twice at Christmas time, so it's magical.
Yeah.
Yes.
All of the lights, all the people.
MoMA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You are. You're a New Yorker. You're just pretending not to be.
Delis.
Yes.
Restaurants.
Yes, exactly.
Theater. Yes.
And that people watch. Now, you are an ontological coach. Is that not correct?
Yes.
$5 word, ontological. What does that mean?
Ontological refers to our whole beingness. So the type of coaching I do for life coaching is about who we're being while we're doing what we're doing, because we are human beings. So it's a very holistic approach to coaching. And when I wanted to get certified as a coach, that was really important to me, to bring spirituality, physicality, emotional intelligence, our skills, all of those things together. And ontological coaching comes right close to counseling, because we look at what stops us from accomplishing what we want, what we say we want to accomplish. And inevitably, it's those programs that were instilled in us when we were young. Don't touch the stove, you'll get burnt. That's bad. That's good. The stories that we tell ourselves, or we're told that we're not very smart. So then we live that out. We can be 50 years old in a brilliant career, still walking around feeling like we're stupid.
Yeah.
And it becomes that unbeatable heavy weight on us. So that's the area I work with my clients, and it's fascinating. I love it.
I bet it is. And there actually is some overlap with Toastmasters and its mission with regards to that particular subject, I've found, because so much, and I would be curious to hear your thoughts on this as a former president of Toastmasters International. There's so many blocks that people have to becoming the leaders that they dream of being, or to self-express through their speech or other means, that really aren't driven by lack of ability or language facility, but by beliefs about what they could or should be, or what they can be. Or is that just me fantasizing?
Well, I won't interrupt your fantasies. I'll let you have them.
But your fantasies might be better. I mean, I don't know.
I have my own. But, I really believe that one of the gifts that I was given when I got into Toastmasters, because I came as a young woman who didn't have any belief in myself. I had no confidence. I had no self-esteem. I felt like I wasn't smart. And yet I had all this pent-up frustration inside me. And when I walked into my very first Toastmasters meeting, which took me 9 months to get to open that door after I'd been invited, I arrived for very different reasons than the person who invited me had in mind. So I believe they came and said to me after I'd done a very terrible presentation in a university class, you should go to Toastmasters. But I didn't go for that. 9 months later, I went in because I was so invisible. I was invisible in my own life, in my community, in my work, in my family, and my own perception was, I had no perception of who I was except I had this frustration. And I believed that I was stupid, so what was I going to say or how was I going to overcome it? So when I finally got brave enough to actually walk into my first Toastmasters meeting, and a beautiful man stood at the end of the bottom of the steps where I walked in, and he said, "Welcome to Toastmasters. My name is Joseph." And Joseph saw something in me that night when we met, and he saw competitiveness, which I had an inkling was there because of sports when I was a child, etc., but wasn't really in touch with it at that time. And he said, "I've been in Toastmasters about 4 years. I haven't finished my first designation. How about we race to our designation?" And that caught me. And I said, I'll beat you to your designation. And I took it on. And as planned on my part, I beat him to our designation. In those days, CTM had 15 speeches. And so I did my 15 speeches before he got his done. But that started to give me an opportunity to stand up and actually speak. And that's something that I didn't do before. I was afraid to actually say my thoughts.
Wow. There is so much to dig in with what you said. But before we roll up our sleeves and really go there are folks that are going to be listening to or watching this that have not been involved in the constant communicator world and or have never been in Toastmasters. So could you explain some of those acronyms that folks might not be familiar with to us, just so we have some understanding of what they mean?
Yes. So back when I joined Toastmasters, the first designation that you would actually achieve in your education curriculum would be called a competent Toastmaster. And so for short, it was called a CTM. We had to complete 15 manual presentations, of which were then evaluated so that we could get suggestions for improvement. Usually people take a year and a half or so to get their first designation. And but again, because Toastmasters is self-paced, it's up to the individuals. I had belonged to my very first club when I had joined was a very small club, so I got to speak frequently. And of course, Joseph would speak frequently, and of course, we were racing. So I spoke more frequently than him. So yeah, it's Toastmasters is a not-for-profit education organization that focuses on communication and leadership. And communication for me is listening, thinking, and then speaking. And that was another thing that kept me involved, because I thought, I really want to be able to listen and I want to be able to think. Yeah. I don't necessarily want to speak.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And it is fascinating. One of the secrets about being a Toastmaster goes as to what you're talking about, listening. Other people are going to be giving speeches, and you, as a Toastmaster who may be evaluating them or may simply be sitting in the meeting or have another role, are forced to listen. And people tend to talk about things that they know. I've been blown away by the things that I have learned from the speeches that I have had the privilege to observe or listen to in my club. One, just a minor example, was there were a number of women from China who were in the club that I ultimately became the president of. And they talked about beautification apps that were popular in their home country, and that people would demand, their parents or whatever, that would demand that they filter themselves through before posting on Instagram or other social. I had no idea such a thing existed. For whatever reason, I felt I needed to know that without ever knowing that I needed to know that. Of course, I've never used a beautification app, but that goes as to the power of listening and that connection with education, and you came to it through an educational institution. Let's go back even further. Pat, once upon a time, there was a little girl. Where did she come into this world?
Well, I was born in a northern province in Canada called Manitoba, and I was born in a hospital, and I was put up for adoption. So
really?
At one week of age, I met my second mother. So short relationships were very short with me in those days. So I was taken home to my forever home, as they say now. Yeah. And a year later, we had adopted my brother, who came to live with us. And it turned out that he was my half-brother. Oh. And so I was raised with my half-brother within a family. And then 9 years ago, I met my sister that had been also adopted, and we didn't know one another existed. So,
how did you all find out each other existed? And you've got to tell us, what was that like? I'm adopted too, so I have to know the answer.
Oh, yes. Okay, the stories of adoption, yes. Yeah. Well, because I grew up in, I was, how do I start? Well, I'll go back to the beginning. When I was born to a woman named Florence. Huh? Florence's sister, Phyllis, couldn't have children. So when Florence gave birth to her daughter, Patricia, me, she phoned her sister and said, "Would you like my baby?" And so because Phyllis couldn't have children, said, "Yes, I will take the baby." And so she came by train and picked me up and took me home. And so I was raised by my biological aunt. And the beautiful part of this was that as I was growing up, my biological mother was known, I knew her as my aunt. And although I knew I was adopted, I didn't know that my aunt was my mother, my biological mother. But I had such an affinity for her. When she would come to visit, I just wanted to be around her. I wanted to touch her skirt. I wanted to hold her hand. I wanted to touch her hair. And I was just a child. I was a small child. But I would go downtown with her, and I would tell all my friends that my beautiful aunt is in town. You should see how beautiful she is. I was totally fascinated by this woman.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so she died when I was just 9 years old. No, 11. Yeah, 9 years old. And so that was the end of that live relationship. But it was very sad, because I found out the week that she died that she was actually my biological mother.
And how did you just have no reaction? You had to have a reaction to that, I assume.
Oh, yes.
Was it like, I kind of always knew, or was it shock, or was it
anger? It was anger, as I remember. I mean, I was 9, so whatever a 9-year-old feels anger, I remember screaming and running.
Amazing.
But, yeah. And so my brother, who was raised with me, he was also her son. So he was adopted also by her sister. So him and I were half brother and sister, and we grew up together. And then we didn't know that Wendy existed. And so 9 years ago, Wendy found us through post-adoption agency in Manitoba. You could search. And we all grew up within 2 hours of one another.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And my sister and I, when we met, we were walking along and we were talking, and her husband was walking behind us, and we started laughing, and he said, "Okay, there's no doubt you two are sisters. You sound identical when you laugh."
And I've got, did you get along with each other? It
Yeah.
sounds like you did. Good.
Yeah. And we've spent time, and we've discovered a lot of things that we have, the old nurture nature conversation.
Yeah.
Although we grew up in very similar sized towns, as I said, just less than 2 hours apart from one another. She grew up in obviously a different home than we did, and a different type of home as well. But her and I love fabric. So we went,
Really?
and she quilts, and I used to sew. And so we ended up in a fabric store, unknown to one another, going, "Oh my goodness, look at this. Come, Wendy, come see this." And she's going, "Pat, come see this." And we're looking at one another going, "We both love fabric."
Wow. Wow.
And we went to a movie, and we went to an Elton John movie, whatever it was called, Rocket Man. We sang through the whole movie. We sat in the back seat of the theater, and both of us sang
No
all
way.
the way through the movies. And I'm looking at her going, "You're one of me?" Most people don't like going to movies with me because I sing all the songs, and she's singing along with me.
Well, we were joking about fantasies earlier. Now, I have always fantasized as an adoptee that I had a secret brother out there. Did you ever have that fantasy yourself?
No, I didn't. No, because I had my half brother, and that was, that was good. I was always curious about my mother, and then when until I was 9, and then I felt quite cheated because I was so in love with her and so fascinated by her. But I was always curious about my dad. That's who I was really curious about then. And I did find out as an adult from one of my aunts who actually knew him that he'd been a professional musician and a real outdoorsman. And my aunt said to me, "If you ever walk into a room where your father is, you will know one another without knowing."
Wow.
She said, "You will be drawn to one another. You're so alike." And I was in a musical at that time that was touring in Manitoba. It wasn't a big production, but we were on the road touring, and we went to the community where my birth father lived, and I sent him a note and said, "I'm in town singing. Please come and see me." And it was the most nerve-wracking production evening that I'd ever
imagine.
spent. Every note, it was like, did my dad hear that? Is my dad approve of this? Is it good enough for him? And at the end, I stood with the cast, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and he never showed up. And I don't know if he was in the audience or not, but he didn't come to see me. And then probably about 10 years after that, I was working with somebody that came from that community and said that he had died of leukemia. And so that was very sad. It was like, I never got to meet him, but he also didn't get to meet me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad.
Although when you talk about that framing of how you view the fact that you never did meet him, that to me sounds like someone who is coming from a different mental space than the younger woman who you described to me entering into Toastmasters. Talk to me a little bit about what was driving that person that you were, that ended up taking so long to join Toastmasters, wasn't really feeling self-expressive in the world, and what changed?
I think that for me, the key was that I actually was in Toastmasters where somebody acknowledged me. I remember receiving what felt like my very first compliment, and I got it in Toastmasters.
Whoa.
Yeah, where somebody said I did a good job, or that was great, or you're really good at this. I'd never heard those words before. So that was so empowering. And so having that kind of supportive environment. Now, in all fairness, there were probably things said around me that I couldn't hear. in all fairness to the people around me. I had lots of opportunities when I was young because my adopted dad was he was a very, very, very quiet man that never said anything, but I knew that if I asked him for something, but I was always afraid to ask because I didn't want to ever inconvenience anyone. And so I just chose to be invisible. And so I never asked for what I wanted. And as a result, I waited for things to come my way. And so when I was asked if I wanted to go to music camp, I went, okay, if I can go. And so I went to music camp and they said, you this is something that you could do as a career. And I'm going, they're just looking for money. They just want people to go to their college. And so I dismissed all those things because I didn't believe in me. And I got all the way to a very famous music program where I was accepted to study, and I drove across Canada to attend it, and I sat in the parking lot. And about 3 hours later, I turned and drove out of the parking lot and never, ever went into the school where I'd been accepted to study because I didn't believe in me. I thought, I won't be good enough. Nobody will want to talk to me even. I'll make a fool of myself. Even though I'd auditioned and got accepted, I just I didn't feel like I had people that believed in me and were really solidly behind me, and I definitely wasn't there for me. So when I got into Toastmasters and people started saying, you could be whatever it is, you could be an area director, or you could be the club president. I'm going, me? And they're going, sure, come on, let's try it. And I would try it and I would succeed. And then it was like fueling the flames. And I was just like, okay, and I want to try another thing. And then my district director phoned and asked if I wanted to be an area director. And I went, okay, I'll try it. What do I do? And so I was what we called area governor at that time, and looked after a number of clubs. Right. And then I just kept going because I started hanging around with people that were in leadership in Toastmasters. And I started seeing that I started thinking very privately, like it was a secret, that I actually thought the same thing they did. And, I had that idea even before they did. So I started seeing that I was capable of thinking and having ideas and being innovative. And so I started validating myself. And when I was in my 30s, I had this heavy weight on me that is still that belief that I wasn't smart. Now, my parents had never told me that I wasn't smart, but they always used to say, and I remember the words so clearly, they would say, Terry, my brother, Terry is so smart. Everything comes easy to him. And Pat, she has to work hard for everything she gets. So the child wasn't told she was stupid, but the correlation was, he's smart and it comes easy, so I must be stupid because it comes hard. Right. And so I carried that without knowing. So in the 1980s, I actually went to Mensa and found out that, guess what? I wasn't stupid.
I'm making an inference from that comment. Wow. I wonder, I think you're the second Mensa member that I've ever met in my life. I'm a little bit intimidated now.
No.
I love
it's just IQ. EQ is so important.
Well, I'm so glad, first and foremost, that you were so honest about the origin of that. A, folks wonder about that, but B, one of the things I found most empowering, and I know a lot of other members of Toastmasters that I've talked to have found so empowering about being in Toastmasters, is that once you find your voice and you get used to expressing yourself out in the world, the fear that you have around talking about the origins of the things that have been holding you back melts away. And then there's real power in that.
Yes. And then we get out of our own way. And, one of the wisest things I ever did when I got to the first level of the district leadership team, which is now called Club Growth Director, I asked somebody, because of their skill with people, somebody I was watching at an international convention, and I thought, they're so easy with people, and I love their joie de vivre, and they were just having fun and laughing, and I went, I want what they've got. And so I walked up to this person. I didn't know what their qualifications were. I didn't know who they were. And I walked up and I said, would you be my mentor? I need what you've got. Now,
that's ballsy. I love it.
It took me many days to get there.
But
I stalked this person, but I finally did it before I got arrested for stalking. And they agreed. That was the gift. They agreed, but they said, it's up to you. When I get home to Dublin, you need to reach out to me and we'll set up a mentoring call. And from that time forward, for many, many, many years, we had a monthly call. Because I asked.
So there is, again, so much in what you just said to explore that I've just got to stop and dig and just dig. Pat, let's talk. I'm going to insert some personal opinions here for you to respond to.
Okay.
One of the things that I have experienced throughout Toastmasters, and it is a true beauty of it for those of you watching or listening who are not members, is that everything is evaluated, but there's a very specific technique that's recommended for evaluation, the sandwich technique, which has praise, constructively framed negative feedback or constructively framed areas for improvement, and then something positive feedback. And the reason why I mention that, I was an instructor at a martial arts school for a while. And one of the things that the chief instructor said as I was training to be an instructor, and I didn't instruct for very long, so I don't want to oversell myself, is he said, make sure you tell people that they do something well every day, because they may never hear anything good that they've done. And in Toastmasters, I've been shocked by how many times using that sandwich method, I found out that that's true. There are people who live their lives for years, decades even, without anyone ever telling them that they did anything well. And so they don't sometimes believe that they can do anything well.
Yep.
Response?
Well, I think it's children live what they learn is a title from, or some words from a song. And I think it's true. If we live without praise and encouragement, we don't even know that it exists. And so we just go along. We don't really know that we're missing anything, but we don't get that reinforcement. But once we get a taste of it, then we see how it supports us and how it can make a difference. And for me, I think back of all the people when I walked into Toastmasters, all the people, like the hundreds of people that touched me, whether it was through an evaluation at a club or it was somebody who walked up to speak to me at a district conference where I was hiding over in the corner, or if it was somebody who came up and said, that was a fabulous introduction that you did, or that was a good presentation that you did as an education session. So I just kept on each acknowledgement when it came from somebody I trusted, so that I would believe it and absorb it and take it in without feeling vulnerable and that I was going to get duped or set up. That then I kept stretching and stretching. And then when I felt ready to run for district office, I moved districts. And so I went into a district 3 provinces away. Nobody knew me, and I was an unknown entity, and I really had to start over again. And I really decided that I wanted to be different, that I wanted to take what I had learned already and start That was going to be the new start. That was go. And I ran the first year, and I was unsuccessful. And the person that won the competition that year, the position, didn't go on the next year. So I thought, okay, I'm the natural. I'll run the next year for the next position that he wasn't running for. And I was again defeated.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, okay. And so I know one of my views in life is that if that door doesn't swing open with ease and grace, then it's not my door. There's something else for me. And so when I didn't get elected the second time, I went, okay, let's step back here for a moment. Let's figure this out. So I was in my brain, not my heart. I was in my brain. Yeah. And I went away and I did evaluation contests, which I won at the district level. I started supporting conferences and doing education sessions there. I spoke in some speaking contests, started mentoring, started chartering clubs, doing all the Toastmasters operational things. And then and I was enjoying that, just being part of the district. And I thought, yeah, maybe I don't have to be in leadership. We'll wait and see. And then my best girlfriend went in, and she was district director. And she was elected, and her officers were elected. And about 2 weeks after she was elected, she phoned me and she said, you know what? I need you to step in to be my club growth director. And I said, sorry, sweetheart. I ran twice. They didn't want me. I will not take a handout. And she said, well, my club growth director quit. I need somebody. And I said, you need to appoint someone else, not me. But she said, but you're ready. You're ready. And I said, I promise you this. And I love her for being persistent, supporting me and loving me this way. And I said, I promise you this, Sheila. Next year, I'll run, and I'll run differently than I ran before. And so the next year, I kept that promise. I got a campaign manager. I got a representative in each of the divisions to speak for me at the events that were held. And I got a campaign team together. I had a campaign speech prepared, and I had handouts, and I had materials, and I came solidly to be a candidate. I was, a nominated candidate, and I won. And the big difference for me was that this time, and the big lesson that I took away from that is that you first have to believe in yourself before other people will believe in you. And while at some level, I was just trying to sneak in unseen the first couple of years that I ran. And the third time I ran, I went, I can do this. I'm good. I'll, not from an ego perspective, but I can handle this. This is a role I can do. And I believed in myself, and it made all the difference. And I've never lost an election since. I went to international and ran for international director. I got elected the first time I ran. I ran for third vice president. I got elected the first time I did. And those were on international level. Yeah. So that I just encourage everybody to, it's not ego, it's honesty with self. That if you have to write down your knowledge, skills, and abilities on a piece of paper and what you've accomplished, do it. Get somebody to read it back to you if you don't believe it yourself, and get a mentor who sees the highest and best in you. And that's the greatest gift we can get and give.
I don't even know what to say except to just raise my hands. But I will. Exactly. Sing it, sister. So we're going to step back a little bit and talk about a couple of the themes that you've mentioned, but marry them together. You, as international president, oversaw the international convention the year that you were president, I assume.
Yes.
And I will say to anyone who is not a Toastmaster who is watching or listening, or the many Toastmasters who are watching and listening but have not had the pleasure of going to an international convention, you've got to do it. I did my first one in 2019. I didn't know anyone. I went by myself. I didn't care. I have friends for life because of that experience. And they have incredible speakers there, not just from Toastmasters itself. There was a man who spoke the year I was there who wrote a whole book, and his keynote was about this as well. Just asking people questions, asking them ridiculous questions. He went to an airport and asked if he could fly a plane. They said, no, but you can fly this hovercraft thing. He had this whole amazing litany of phenomenal experiences that he had that changed his life because he just asked. And that's what happened to you. And you said that again. And in a way, by building a campaign, you were also asking over and over. How can you get someone who might have a fear about asking? I, like you, grew up. I didn't ask questions. I grew up in a very military household, and I got what I was to be given. I said, thank you, and then shut up. Yeah. So learning how to ask all the time was hard for me. And there are a zillion different reasons why people might have that syndrome. What do you say to folks who are seeking to bust out and ask questions, ask for things?
Oh, it's such a deep question, Scott.
We like to go deep.
It's like, where do we start on this phyllo pastry, layer by layer by layer by layer? But, I love to look at the fear that's around that. And we have so many judgments that we bring in our own stories to that. So if we ask for something, is our story that somebody said around us, because I believe it's somebody else's words that we hear in our heads, that's selfish. Or who do you think you are? Yeah. Or why would you deserve that? Yeah. Or how dare you? So all those words that aren't our words, but they're words that we've heard from someone else, that are judgmental, that are limiting. And it's, I practiced a long time because I was on my own for over 20 years after raising a son, and being on my own for 20 years, looking in the mirror and telling myself that I loved myself, and really practicing, doing exercises, having a Maori woman teach me to get into my heart out of my head.
Wait, what's the story there? You can't just let that one slip in, then just turn the doorknob and fly away. Come on. What?
I'm just testing your listening skills.
Yeah. Don't.
Well, it's one of those multiple people that come and go in our lives when we see people as gifts, and we're willing, even though we don't know what they're talking about, to reach out and say, please, thank you. This woman, Suzanne, she's a Maori descent, and she came to me after a district conference, and she said to me, you could, and these are my words, they're probably not the words she used, but this is how I remember it. You could be a great leader if you just got in touch with your heart. And I heard the words, and I knew what the words meant intellectually, but I had no idea how that would actually happen. And I probably had a total blank look on my face, because I was blank in terms of what does that mean.
Yeah.
And so somehow we got around to the discussion that she would come to my place on the weekend, and we would spend some time together, and she would help me understand it. So she came, and her husband came with her, but she and I walked around in my home, and I said, what do I do? And she said, you talk. So I would talk about all sorts of stuff. It didn't have to be about anything in particular, just talking. And she'd say, okay, now you're in your head. And she said, keep talking. And I'd talk, and how you just talk, and then you go into different topics. And she said, now you're in your heart.
Wow.
She'd say, can you feel the difference?
Wow.
And then I'd go, not really. And then, okay, let's keep talking. And we did this over a span of, I think, 2 days, like as I recall it. And at the end of that, I had this vague feeling of when I was in my heart and when I was in my head. And it actually sounds differently.
Really?
And it feels differently. And so this is one of the things that I do in my coaching when people get going, oh, la, 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 and I go, okay, so we're just having an intellectual discussion now, and we can have an intellectual, even argument or debate. So I'm going to ask you to just put your hand on your heart and take a couple of deep breaths and just get really grounded and feel your heart. And now tell me what you think and feel. And it shifts. It shifts us. We go from beings, or from doers to beings. And it's then about our beingness. Because we're all capable of doing things, but we're not human doers. We're human beings. Yeah.
Mind-blowing. Wow.
And so while you can lead a club by, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to be presidents distinguished, we're going to be top shelf, we're going to be all those things, and you run over people and you ignore people and you diss them and you make your ego big and you arrive and you celebrate and everybody else steps back. You might have done all the things that were on the list to do, but who were you being when you did it? And you know, Maya Angelou said what? People will remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yes.
And that's when we're in our beingness.
Wow.
And so that was a tough journey for me. I practiced that. That was probably, I was district director in 2001, 2002, and I'm still practicing that today. So that's 20 years I've been practicing that. And there are days, because I have a very active brain and I'm smart intellectually, there are days when I sit and I put my hand on my heart and I take deep breaths and I just feel that grounding and getting connected to my heart. And it makes a difference in my life.
That's what Transformational Pathways is all about. That's amazing. I almost hate to change the subject because that's such a, let's just sit in silence and absorb that one sort of story.
Let's just be.
Yeah, let's just be. Dead space fills the podcast for another hour. Oh, and then we wonder why no one's listening anymore. Well, so we have to, but wow, I mean, that was fantastic. What was the hardest thing about being the president of an international organization? And by the way, not just any old organization. It is one that's been around for decades and literally is a household name. And then there you are leading it. Tell us a story about something that was where you were like, I just can't even believe this just happened.
Well, there's quite a few stories that I could share. One of the first story I want to share is the first day that I was, so when I was inaugurated as international president, and my son, who was then, what would he have been? I guess he was about 38 years old, and him and his wife came to the international convention. And they were my guests at that event. Where was it, by the way? It was in Palm Desert.
Yeah.
And they came. My son, all the years I'd been in Toastmasters, had never been at a Toastmaster event. Did not know about it.
Naughty boy.
No, that was fine. He had his things. He was a hockey player, and
I
he
love
had his things. I'm not one to say if I do it, my family has to do
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
it felt very much my journey in Toastmasters. But anyway, my son Quentin and his wife Gabiba, they arrived at the International Convention, and they went on to do a bunch of things during the week. And I was busy coming and going. And so Saturday night was the inauguration. And so we got all dressed up in our evening gowns and suit and everything. And we went down to wait to go into the march in where the president comes in down the red carpet and the spotlights and everything. And so my son's on one side and my daughter-in-law is on the other side of me. And we're standing at the back of the hall, and I'm announced. And my son's announced, and my daughter-in-law. And we start to walk in. And my son looks at me and he said, "Mom, all these people know you." I said, "Yes, sweetheart, most of them do, and I know them." And so we walked to the front, and I had to go up on the guest head tables, and they had said that they didn't want to sit at the head table with me, so they agreed that they would sit with the past presidents on the floor in front of the head table. So I went up there. After dinner, I went down and visited with them for a while, and then I had to give my address to the membership. And so I delivered my presentation, and my son came up to me after, and he said, "Mom, if I would have known you were that important, I would have sat at the head table with you." I thought it was so wonderful because it spoke to how much of my own journey it was. And my son was off doing his thing, and I was still just mom. And that was the beauty of that I was just still his mom. And I was the mom to my daughter-in-law. And here I was standing there in this gorgeous red dress, giving this address and people are applauding me. And my son had never heard me speak before. I mean, he heard me speak as mom, but not speaking.
What was his reaction? It must have been beautiful.
He said, if I would have known you were that important and everybody knew you, I would have hung out with you more.
That's just.
And you know what? The next day we were back to the very same way we always were. The glow disappeared quickly. But the other thing that was a real learning experience for me, and which I loved, I have to say, I'll say right up front, Scott, that not everybody enjoys every day of being international president. It's a very, very demanding role, and none of us are paid. So you have your full-time job, you have your family, you have all this other stuff going on in your life while you do this role, and it is another full-time job. Learning opportunity. So you're learning all the time and being asked to do things that you'd not done before. The first board meeting, so the elections were held at the International Convention, were all confirmed. And on Sunday after the convention, everybody goes home, flies home from the convention. The board walks into the boardroom. The new president walks in, sits down at the head table. At her right sits the immediate past international president, in my case, which was Gary Schmidt, who was a long-term friend of mine. And beside him sits the CEO of Toastmasters International, who is Dan Rex. Now, I've known Gary and Dan for years and years. So we're sitting there, and the board comes in, files in, sits down, and we're all sitting in this U shape, and we're across the front. And we're sitting, and Dan leans over and he says, "Madam President, it's time to start." And I sit there, and Gary says, "Pat, rap the gavel." And I said, I'm afraid.
Understandable.
So I finally picked up the gavel and called the meeting to order. And I'm so glad for Dan and Gary being there and supporting me just to pick up the gavel and call the meeting. Now, I knew what to do, but I felt like I didn't. And it was brilliant. And that first day, somebody came up to me and said, "Well, we need a woman to come and speak at this event." And I said, well, let me think about that. So now I'm thinking, I'm the president, I have to make all these decisions. So I started running things over in my mind, and I'm figuring out this solution. And Dan Rex comes up to me in the hallway on a break from the board meeting, and he said, Madam President, could we have a conversation? And I said, yes. And he said, you and I are going to make all the decisions together this year. I'm here with you.
Aww.
And I went, oh, good.
Yeah.
And that feeling of, here's a man, he's got the inside information because he works with the staff.
Right.
He hears the board issues year after year after year, so he has a lot of the history. And although I'd been in Toastmasters for 20 some years at that point in time, you're at a different level of knowing what transpires. So there I am with a partner, and we had a brilliant year together. We were the best. We were the best team that I've ever played on, because we both are voracious readers.
Oh.
We both can debate stuff. We both got opinions, and we're both willing to change our minds.
Yeah. I love that.
Which
love
was
it.
so
love
fabulous, because we would sit and go, I read Lencioni's The Motive. What did you think? Or I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or I read blah, blah, blah. And we would talk about it. And sometimes Dan would change his mind. Sometimes I would change my mind. But we always could find a ground to meet. And we did so many things that year. Like, we took on all the new branding of Toastmasters International.
Huge.
We created and brought together, it was a culmination of Region Advisors. That was the first year Region Advisors went into existence. It was the first year we brought all the district leaders to International for training. It was the first year we brought all the semifinalists for the World Champion of Public Speaking to the convention, so that they could actually hear the very best.
Right. And that is that's phenomenal. And that's part of the joy of being there. Wow.
Yeah. So we did lots of exciting things like that. We had a dues increase. We did some, things that were allotted, and we did some things that were not very popular, but it was all part of the leadership and traveling around the world and making Toastmaster friends and visiting clubs and districts, and the stretch opportunities that were available every day was just phenomenal. I was probably scared most of the time, but I knew that people had me. I knew I could phone World Headquarters. I knew I could phone some of my friends, my board members, certainly my executive committee members. And so I knew that they had my back. So while I was out there, but a funny story, being a mom and being on my own and making my own way and having my own career, etc. I became, I was quite frugal because I wanted to buy my own home and etc. And so I had this mentality of what I would spend money on and not. And so when you're the international president, you're actually given a credit card when you're traveling, so you're not caught. Right? Because there might be expenses. Yeah. So I'm traveling, and I had been, I forget exactly where I was, but I think I'd been in Africa, South Africa, and I was flying and I was going to Germany. And I was in an airport, and I don't remember the airport. I wish I remembered all the details, but too many airports in too many days. But I was in this airport, and I had two large suitcases, because I'm on the road for 3-4 weeks, right? 3 weeks, I think I was that time. So I have all my work clothes and a few tourist clothes as well, because we would do a few things on the side when we were finished,
of course,
visiting clubs.
How could you not?
Yeah, and so I'm standing in this airport, and I'm going to check in my luggage, and because I'm changing aircrafts, they wanted $200 for my luggage. Well, I am devastated. I'm going, $200 for my luggage is exorbitant. This is
What country was this?
2010. I can't remember.
Oh my God.
And I'm just freaked. And I'm going, I can't spend $200 to get my luggage there. So I went and inquired if they had a locker, because I thought, well, maybe I'll sort my clothes, leave half of it in the locker here. There was no lockers available to rent. So now I'm still back to $200. So I phoned World Headquarters and I said, they want $200 for me to put my luggage on the plane. And if once I get there, then I'll probably have to pay another $200 to get it home.
Yeah.
What do I do? And they said, would you pay the luggage fee and get on the plane and go? But it was but for me, it was like, this is members' money.
Yeah.
That's the only place Toastmasters gets money is.
Yeah.
As students, we pay tuition. That's our only source of income. And so I was very, very aware of where what the dollars were being spent. We invest our money to make money. Very cognizant of being responsible about that, as steward of our dollars. And so now I kind of laugh, because I know so many times we would have gone out for a dinner and spent $200 easily on a personal basis, and not thought anything of it.
Yeah.
$200 for luggage for Toastmasters felt exorbitant.
Well, very inspiring hearing that sort of concern for where the members' money is going. But it also does go as to something, and I'd be curious to your thoughts around this as a business person. You mentioned in passing that you raised prices when you were there. That being said, there's cost, and then there's value. There's benefit, and then there's value.
Yeah.
Toastmasters has benefits, but let's face it, in my opinion, there's nothing else that is a better value than that amount that you spend on your dues. Do you disagree?
Oh, no, particularly working in learning and development, when we spend a lot of money having speakers come in, or presenters come in, or facilitators come in at thousands of dollars a day. And Toastmasters can not only give us the knowledge, but also allow us to practice. So we actually have skills when we're finished, where we go sit in a classroom and somebody speaks at us for a day, and we put the binder or put the file in our way, and we never look at it again. And we don't have any skills. We're no different than when we walked in, except we're 1 year older. But we haven't acquired anything. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of knowledge we would retain, but we haven't got any skills. And that's what we're talking about in Toastmasters, building the skills. So it is priceless. Helen Blanchard, who was the very first woman international president, said, if we get out of Toastmasters all there is to get out of Toastmasters, we'll never get out of Toastmasters. And I really believe that there's an endless supply of things that we can learn and grow. And now that we have the accredited speakers program, those are professional speakers that are paid, and they're coming to Toastmasters for accreditation. We've got world-class speakers, people that are well known in all the speaking organizations around the world, like the professional speakers associations, etc., that are members of Toastmasters, because they come because we give evaluation. And so if they can be a subject matter expert in their topic of expertise, but are they a good speaker? Can they engage with an audience? Do they hold the attention? Can they tell a story? And that's why they come to Toastmasters. And when we were creating pathways, those are the things that we looked at. We looked at, because I was part of that process, we looked at who is our target audience in Toastmasters? And there were 5 major groups that when we started designing Pathways curriculum, we considered these. The first one was young professionals. need some survival skills in the workplace, need some self-esteem, need to be able to present, answer, speak up in meetings, impromptu speaking, those kinds of things. Some thinking and listening skills as well. The next one was those mid-career people that get stalled, that maybe now have supervisory responsibilities that do not want to provide feedback. They can learn how to give feedback. We had professional speakers was one of those groups that walks in off the street looking for help from us. Another one was English as a second language, second, third, fourth, fifth language, huge. And the fifth group was the retired folks that want to stay mentally active, engaged, might be now having time to write books, run podcasts, do initiatives in their community, run for council, run for, a community organizations, run Rotary, whatever it might be. That's their passion in their time now that they've got it. So those were the target groups that we looked at, saying this is the groups that we're actually appealing to when we come as a Toastmasters organization worldwide. So it's a broad catch basin for us.
And if you're listening or watching and are part of these groups and not joining Toastmasters, let that just be a hint.
And an invitation. Absolutely. Because one thing I will say about Toastmasters is that it is warm and welcoming. Pat, I'm going to begin to close us out with a little bit of fun here. Okay.
What do you think is better? Being the president of Toastmasters International or world domination? Or are they the same?
Oh, well, it depends on how big your world is.
Let's go big, Pat. Come on.
You know what? Every moment of being international president was my drug of choice. I loved it. I adored it. I stretched and grew in ways that I never imagined being able to. My confidence, I could feel myself actually expanding and growing mental and emotional muscles on a daily basis. Like there were some days when I didn't recognize myself.
Amazing.
And it was absolutely phenomenal. It was like steroid for me.
I love it.
And the interesting thing was that my career at work went parallel to my climb in Toastmasters. Like
I love it.
They were going up and I was doing the same kind of work at work, being paid.
Wow, almost like a virtuous feedback loop.
Yep.
Pat, after hearing all of this, and this has truly been amazing, people are going to want to connect with you. They're going to want to find out more about you. Where can they do those things?
I'm sorry, they can't. I just leave on a spaceship and I go to Venus when this is over, where I preside.
Pat, how can I love you even more? You truly are my new best friend. Just for saying that.
No, I'm, how do I, I live in I'm in District 21, Region 1. I'm a Region 2 advisor starting in July. I'm currently a region advisor for Europe and the United Kingdom. So I'm on Toastmasters website if you look under Region Advisors. My email, I'm willing to share my email. If people write to me on email, it's really important that in the subject line that they put Toastmasters or a question relating to Toastmasters, or I don't open it because I get a lot of spam because of my career being a coach, etc. So my email is Pat the Trainer, so PATTHETRAINER at shaw.ca. So that's SHAW.ca.
Wonderful.
So,
Pat.
and I won't give you my phone number. because I don't want your husband coming after me.
Exactly. And he just might. He's right behind the curtain. He's probably heard the whole thing. And he wants to be your best friend too. I got you first. Pat, it has been incredible having you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. Now, for those of you who are listening or watching, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review or a comment. Also, don't forget to follow District 46 on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. If you're new to Toastmasters, check out Toastmasters46.org. That's Toastmasters46.org to learn more about us or visit one of our clubs, because Toastmasters is where leaders are made. Ah, you said it with me.
Thank you so much for joining us on Transformational Pathways. If you enjoyed today's episode or got anything out of it, please rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about Toastmasters District 46, check out the link in the show notes below.